and Live by Night was a great book about that kind of area. It was historical fiction, but it should have shot in Ybor City. Ybor City still looks almost exactly the way it did during Prohibition era. It is a historical district, but they went up to Georgia, and not only did they recreate Ybor City in Georgia, it was still cheaper by recreating it than it was to shoot in actual Ybor City because of the tax incentives, right? So that was a Florida-based project about a Florida-based city written by a Florida author that was shot in Georgia.
All right, Tyler, welcome to Unplugged.
Thanks, John. Happy to be here.
First question, what dragged you into production?
That is an excellent question. I realized very early on in my career that being a medieval Japanese history major probably wasn't the best career path to take. It was a moment in college where I was student, really happy to be here and excited for what I was learning. And I talked to my professor, and he unironically reached the bottom of his desk and pulled out a hip flask and just did a shot in front of me in his office. And he stared right at me. He was like, "Son, you do nothing with this degree. You teach or you work at Starbucks." And I was like, oh,
I don't want to do that.
Yeah, maybe I should think about doing something else. So I kind of bounced around a little bit and got interested into screenwriting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I was ever very good at screenwriting, but I was interested in it. And that actually led to just getting into production. I ultimately did actually graduate at some point in my career. I got an MFA in film production from Savannah College of Art and Design. But in between there, I worked for a long time. As most people do, I started out as a PA and worked my way up to a coordinator, production manager, and towards the end of my career, I was working as a line producer.
Okay. So it wasn't something where, as a young man, you decided, hey, I want to be a film director.
No,
it came later.
In fact, I knew very early on that I shouldn't say this, but I really dislike talking to actors. I just don't have the brain for that. You know, it's like, what's my motivation? I'm paying you. That's your motivation, which is not something that an actor wants to hear, right? So, but it did lend itself to being behind the cameras, behind the scenes, and certainly in the production offices. So I really enjoy logistics. I like putting together productions. I like looking at, where all the pieces are at and how they fit together.
At what point did you feel like it could be a career for you?
I had a sort of an embarrassment of riches where I just kind of stumbled onto a production, and that led to another production, another production, another production. So I really at no point was kind of free falling and wondering where the next job was. It just always were kind of lined up. And what brought me originally to Tampa Bay actually was kind of out of the blue. A friend of mine was the chair of the film department at University of Tampa, and they had just started their film program. This is like circa 2008. And he called me up on a Friday. Was like, "Hey, we're starting a department. We don't really have anyone that has a Master's of Fine Arts, which is required a minimum to be able to teach at UT. Would you be interested?" And I came down here on a kind of a whim, ironically, because I remember originally the teacher told me that the only thing you do with this degree is teach, and then here I am.
And they are teaching.
Like teaching. Now, I had a production company up in Savannah, but it brought me down to Tampa to teach at UT. And within a couple of weeks of being here, I was asked to work on Sunlight Jr., which was a Naomi Watts and Matt Dillon film.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't really have anyone available at the time here in the Tampa area who had any feature experience, which I had, particularly in production management. So I ended up on Sunlight Jr., and then that rolled right into another film, another film, and another film. And pretty soon I was working almost full time, just jumping from one set to the next here in Tampa, up until about 2013. When out of the blue, the county decided, hey, we should start a film commission. And I got a phone call again.
So there wasn't a film commission before that?
No, there wasn't a film commission.
Wow.
Which is weird for a city of this size and scale. Even back, 13, 15 years, Tampa was still the third largest hub in the state of Florida for productions, and just attractions, amenities, and everything else.
Yeah.
So the fact that we didn't have a film commission was weird. But yeah, that was another job that
Who handled the details before then?
No one, which is insane to me. There was part of the Visitor Bureau, and at the time it was called Tampa Bay and Company. There was a person within the organization who worked film kind of part-time. Like she had a little closet where she kept a filing cabinet for permits. And, she would devote 3-4 hours a week to processing permits. But if she didn't get to you, because that wasn't her main job. She didn't get to you, right?
Yeah.
And it was just kind of this. It wasn't really a production office. It wasn't a film commission. It was just kind of a somebody to field a phone call every once in a while. So it really wasn't what we consider a film commission today.
Yeah.
But that was another job where I wasn't looking for it. I never expected, never wanted the job in the first place.
Right.
And it was just one of those things where I got a phone call. I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And I don't know, just, all right, well, let's try this out.
From there, I mean, was it a transitionary thing where you're going from being on the set to, you know, a lot of paperwork, right?
You know, I think it could have been,
Yeah.
right? Most film commissions are set up under a true government structure, right? They're part of a city or a county. In Tampa, at the time, when they were recreating a film commission out of whole cloth, right? It didn't previously exist. And they set it up as a independent business. So we're actually not part of Hillsborough County or the city of Tampa. We're our own entity, and we're kind of a contract hire, right? They contract us to service productions and all the logistics and the permitting, but we're our own thing. And because of that, we kind of could do what we wanted to do. And having no previous film commissioner experience, for better or worse, I didn't know another way to operate outside of how I'd been operating on sets. So what myself and the previous film commissioner, Dale Gordon, at the time was doing is we were kind of making a de facto production office that was providing production services, which is very different than what a normal film commission does. So we're really structured differently. So to your question, was it different or a transition? No, because we didn't know any better, right? We literally just kept doing what we had previously been doing. Just now we're calling it a film commission, when in reality we're just running a production office.
Yeah, but you didn't get to work on sets like you did previously.
Yes and no. I mean, we took a very active role. So when a production comes through town, I make sure I go out to set, or someone from my office does.
Yeah.
You know, we were always very active being there. In fact, again, I didn't know any better. I just thought, you know, this is what a production office does. This we should be doing. So I was showing up at like 4:30 in the morning to bag meters and put out, safety cones. I was there unlocking gates to parks to let people in. I was there when they're wrapping out to make sure everything was okay. Like that's not a normal film commission thing to do.
Yeah.
You know, it really isn't. So did I miss it? Not really, because I never liked being on set anyway. I was always more of an office person, but we were still very active on sets.
You didn't like being on sets?
You know, there's the old adage, hurry up and wait, right?
Yeah.
And I am not that guy. I got things to do. Going back to what I was saying about being a director, you know, I don't want to have to argue why you should be doing this or what your motivation is, or wondering what catastrophe is about to happen. It's just like, we're paying a lot of money to be here. Let's get this done. This is a product we're making. And that kind of sounds reductive, but for me, it really was always a business. And how do we get to the final product? How do we get this out there? Because I've always been of the opinion, if you make something at a very high level and no one ever sees it, you didn't make a movie, you made a home video.
Right. Early in my career, when I worked on film sets, which were very few, I right away I decided, this isn't for me. Long hours. I think TV is where I want to be, and that's why I've been in TV for so long. Because when you work in film, it may take years for you to even touch a camera.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of long hours, that's something I don't think people really appreciate. It's not untoward to have a 16, 18-hour day sometimes. And, that's fine once in a blue moon. But, if it drags on and you do a lot of that, or you're unfortunate enough to be on a shoot where you have multiple overnights, it just wears on you. And when you're younger, that's okay. But then you start getting into your late 20s and early 30s and into your 40s. It's like, I don't want to do this.
I'm getting too old for this.
This is too old. Yeah. I'm burned out. Like, I want to be in bed by 8 p.m.
Right.
I don't care what I'm doing.
So now you're able to do more of a set schedule.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we still keep it pretty tight. We were talking offline before we started recording just how busy my calendar is.
Yeah.
So I'm still constantly going. I think I have like 9-10 meetings today, and we do a lot of special events. But I try to be home at a reasonable hour that have more of a work-life balance that you don't necessarily have on the film sets.
Yeah. What was one film that you got involved with early on that you're proud of?
I'm going to go back to the Naomi Watts film, and I'll give you one from the film commission perspective as well. But I hate to say it, but I don't think it was a particularly good film. But it was one of those films from a production point of view that everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
What was the name of it?
Sunlight Junior.
Okay.
It's streaming out there. It's got a lot of big actors in it, but it's a very bleak and depressing film. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think in this case it's a little too much. But everything that could go wrong did go wrong. But from a production standpoint, we were able to figure it out and overcome every one of those fires. And these were catastrophic fires, in some cases actual fires. We had someone die on set and drive their car through our production van. I mean, it wasn't a crew member, but it was just insane things, right? I mean, in this case, an elderly individual was across the street from where we were holding all of our trucks on a long weekend, and he died, unfortunately, going through the bank drive-through, slumped forward, foot on the accelerator, and this car careened through 4 lanes of traffic up an embankment and shot itself like an arrow through our camera truck. Like, who has that happen?
How
right?
can that happen?
It's insane. Right. And then, this can't get worse than this. Believe me, it can. And just another thing happened. It's like, this set is either cursed or this is just the universe trying our patience. Yeah. But we were able to get through all that.
What about that film went well?
Nothing went well with that. Literally nothing went well with that. It was one of those shoots where we walked away at the end of it, and I think we had over $100,000 in loss and damages. It just took weeks off of my life, if not years off of my life. But it was one of those things where it's like, wow, if you can get through this and solve a problem that is just so out of left field, you can get through anything. And it really was a great learning experience because I've dealt with problems before, but nothing like this. So it really prepared me, ironically, for the film commission where we deal with this stuff every single day. Because we're not working on one production, we're working on multiple productions, right? And there was a stretch there where any given time we might have 14, 20, 25, 30 productions happening in a week, and we're having to deal with all those, right? So, a lot of crews, they're only seeing what they're working on. We're looking at it from top down and saying, well, we've got 14, 18, however many productions, they're here, and here, and they're interacting here, and we need these things. So there's always something going wrong that we're having to think about.
What's something that people don't realize about your job?
Just the absurdity of it.
Yeah. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that people never see.
Absolutely. And you see the final product on TV and like, oh, that was cool. But very rarely do people sit there and really think about how those things were made. So we get crazy requests, Chris, that most jobs will never have to deal with, right? It's like, hey, we want to blow up a car today, or we want to create a fire tornado in the middle of, your big downtown park. Or the one I always like to use is that we had a request to have a Native American woman sort of ride bareback pony while firing flaming arrows, running down on top of a horse through downtown Tampa, right? Like, oh, that's an interesting request. How do we do that? Or, the one that gets me the most is we had a request from the History Channel to do a Viking funeral on the Hillsborough River, which, all right, I can light a boat on fire. How hard is that? Oh, it's real hard.
It's real hard.
It's real hard. Like all of a sudden I'm talking to the EPA and the Coast Guard and everything. It's like, what is going on? Like, I didn't realize this was going to be this hard. But if you think about it, you just can't light something on fire. What chemicals are inside of it? Is it going to burn? Is it going to release something toxic into the water? Like all these things had to be solved. And that took weeks of planning to actually come across. So the hardest thing in my job that people just don't think about is just the craziness of my job. Yeah. One more example, we had America's Got Talent filming at the convention center, and one of the acts was some guy who played around with extremely deadly poisonous snakes, and for obvious reasons they didn't want to have these snakes inside of a auditorium with a lot of people in case they got loose. So like, well, let's do it in the park. You know how hard it is to get permission to have incredibly venomous, deadly snakes in a public park, and if they got loose, what would happen?
If one gets loose?
Yeah, it's like, oh.
Do you shoot it? What do you do?
Did we have 5 cobras or 6 cobras? I don't remember, right? It's like, oh, no, now we need like snake wranglers around the perimeter of the park. We had to make sure that, the hospital has the right antivenom for a snake that is normally only found in South America.
Talk about behind the scenes.
Right. So crazy stuff like that is, no one ever thinks about it. They watch it on TV. It's like, oh, that was a cool, episode of America's Got Talent. Oh no, that took weeks of planning.
So is it hard? Is it hard for Tampa to compete with other states?
I mean, it's not Tampa competing; it's Florida competing.
Yeah,
right?
Florida. I should say.
And it is. The film industry is one of the most incentivized industries on the planet. Absolutely. If you're not giving cash away by the boatload, productions are going to go somewhere else because someone else is giving cash away by the boatload.
Yeah.
And if it's not a state, then it's a country, right? You have a lot of productions now that have gone from, predominantly Atlanta and New Orleans, where it was kind of their big production hubs. And now they're filming in Poland and Lithuania, in England, or in Canada, because they're giving away tons of money. So we are at a disadvantage by not having a statewide incentive, one. Two, we haven't had a statewide incentive in many, many, many years. So going back to 2015 was the last time we had an incentive, at least on the books. And in reality, we hadn't given any money away since 2013. So it's been over 10 years.
Why does that go away?
Well, people like to paint broad strokes and say it's a Republican issue or it's a Democrat issue. It's neither, right? I mean, I think there is such a demand and interest in film on both sides of the aisle that if we had a chance to bring the incentive back meaningfully, they would, right? It's not about that. It's about certain leaders in place. When they come in, they want to change things up. And I do think that there is a conflation or a monolith that film becomes. And no matter what side of the aisle you're on, you can point to a production or a loud voice. I'm talking like sort of the 1%, those big actors that have a platform to speak. And they say, well, I don't agree with that person. Or I don't agree with that person. But that's not the film industry. The film industry are the thousands and thousands of people that work in the films. It's not the actor on screen, right?
Yeah.
That's what people fail to see. I always recommend people actually sit through the credits and just see the sea of people, the village.
Those
of
are
people.
all jobs that
those
you
are all,
can
Those
get.
are all jobs,
Yeah.
and the lion's share of those jobs are mom and pop jobs, right? It's family owned businesses. They own a grip and electric company, or they own an audio company, and they are the ones that are investing, taking the small business loans out to buy that equipment, and they're renting themselves out. And everyone's like, oh, Hollywood's a very blue Democratic industry, and I'll tell you, most of the crews are not. They're craftsmen. They're people who are electricians, they're carpenters, they're greensmen, they're greenskeepers, they're truck drivers. Right? These are salt of the earth people who honestly don't have enough time in the day to read the paper or watch CNN or Fox News. They're just trying to put food on their table, right? So it's why a state goes away from incentives is, I think, leadership in this case kind of looked at it and said, well, we don't want to incentivize film anymore because it's very blue, or it's not my side of the aisle. But that really was such a minority. Unfortunately, it was people in leadership who was leading that discussion. They just wanted fundamentally to get rid of it, even though the populist vote was there had they let the vote go to the floor. So that really put us at a disadvantage as a state. And because of that, we've had to step up in other ways. So Hillsborough County, where we're sitting right now, was one of the very first counties in the United States to create a localized incentive. And now a lot of the counties in Florida has a localized incentive. So Pinellas County, Broward, Miami, Orange County, Orlando, Jacksonville, Duval. So there's money out there, but never as deep of pockets as we potentially need. Really you need a state to step in. So we do a lot with a little.
So each major city has its own film commission. Like I know Pinellas County has.
That's an interesting question. So that's not true in most states.
Yeah.
Florida is very, very set up. It's set up differently, and the reason for that is because when we had an incentive, so prior to 2015, we were the third largest filming destination in the United States.
Oh wow!
So we had the volume of productions coming through that demanded that we need a lot of film commissions. So at one point, almost every county in the state had a film commissioner or a film liaison. And that's not true in most other states. So you look at Georgia, as much production as they have, there's the Georgia State Film Commission, and they have a satellite chapter in Savannah. But that's how most states are structured.
Yeah.
And if there is a large city or kind of a production hub, then maybe they'll have a film commission. But in Florida, there's one almost in every county. And that's still true to this day. So we have the most commissions of any state in the U.S.
Do different counties have different incentives?
They do,
Yeah.
and they're all slightly structured differently. And it really has to do with where the funding's coming from, because depending on what tax dollars are being activated, they have very specific uses. So if it's like an ad valorem or a property tax, right? That can only be used for this. If it's bed tax, it can only be used for this. So because of that, the structure of each incentive is just slightly different. So we were looking for something that's more marketable for this area, or something that's more economic or job driven in this market. So, but most of the big cities now in the state of Florida do have some sort of incentive.
I see. So in other words, Pinellas County might have a different bed tax or
yeah. And actually, a great example. So,
Yeah.
Pinellas and Hillsborough both use bed tax, which is market-based driven, right? So bed tax is dollars that is collected when someone from out of state stays at a hotel or resort, right? It's not paid by residents, it's paid by visitors. Whereas another county like Broward, it's coming out of their general fund. So they're more interested in the economic driver. How much money are you spending directly? How many people are you hiring? Whereas, Hillsborough and Pinellas, we're looking at it as like, well, we need to refresh the bed tax because that's what we're using it from. So how many hotels are you booking? Is this family friendly? Is this something that's marketing the area? So even though the amount of money be giving away is usually pretty similar depending on where you're at within the state, what projects qualify is determined by where the money's coming from.
Okay. So speaking about Georgia, that they do take a lot of productions away from Florida.
They do. So, and I think almost criminally in some cases, there is really no cap on how much money they give away every year. So, no one can compete with something where it's bottomless, right?
Yeah.
Like there is no end to the amount of money they can potentially give away. And the way they work it too is that if you are working in the state of Georgia, you're considered a resident under the way that their incentive program is used. So even though they're giving away a ton of money, there's been a lot of studies that show that money isn't actually staying in Georgia because it's mostly going to crew, right? The highest cost on any production set is always going to be your crew.
Yeah.
And if those people are there and they're getting paid a lot of money, but then as soon as the production's done, they go back to where they normally live, that money's leaving with them, right?
Yeah.
Whereas a smarter state, I would argue, are localized incentives. We're making sure that they're hiring locals, people who are actually residents here, true residents. They have homes here. They pay rent. They pay a mortgage. They buy cars here. Right? They're actually contributing to the economy. Whereas I don't think that's true in some states like Georgia.
So, for instance, Live by Night. Were you around when that?
I absolutely was.
Yeah,
So,
a film about Ybor, not shot in Ybor.
Yeah, Live by Night was written by a guy named Ransom Riggs, and it is about Prohibition era Ybor City, which for those who might be listening on the podcast who aren't from the Tampa area, it's kind of our historic district, and it is I believe the second oldest city in the state of Florida, right behind St. Augustine, and it was kind of the Wild West. Ybor City was its own entity. It really wasn't part of the state. It wasn't part of a county. It was just owned by an individual. He owned the entire town, Mr. Ybor, which is named after. And it was the cigar capital of the United States. But because of that, a lot of criminal elements came down because there was no sheriff, right? It was kind of like you either know someone or you don't. And if, wink, wink, nod, nod, we know you can get away with what you're doing. And Live by Night was a great book about that kind of area. It was historical fiction. But it should have shot in Ybor City. Ybor City still looks almost exactly the way it did during Prohibition era. It is a historical district. But they went up to Georgia, and not only did they recreate Ybor City in Georgia, it was still cheaper by recreating it than it was to shoot in actual Ybor City because of the tax incentives, right? So that was a Florida-based project about a Florida-based city written by a Florida author that was shot in Georgia. In fact, it was shot in Brunswick, Georgia. If you ever driven through Brunswick, it's basically a rest stop on the way up to Savannah. But they found empty land out there, and they built an entire city
Ybor
from scratch. Yeah.
Did they leave it there after they left?
No, they took it down.
They took it down. It was a set.
It was just a set. But I remember Ben Affleck, I believe directed it, but definitely starred in it. But he was down here. They were scouting for several weeks. They had their big production team, and we were convinced we were going to land this project. Like, oh my gosh, this is going to be great. They're going to shoot in Ybor. And what they did is they came down, they got as many example photos as they needed. They had architects and draftsmen come down and kind of sketch out the overall main street in Ybor. And what we didn't know is they were doing this as kind of research to rebuild the town up in Georgia. So we were excited for a project that ended up not coming at all. And I believe at the time, I was working at the Film Commission, but the Film Commissioner, this is circa 2013, I think.
Yeah.
Dale Gordon sent them a giant platter of Cubans from Cuban sandwiches, not people.
Or cigars.
Or cigars from the Columbia restaurant. And she sent it up there to Brunswick, Georgia, for the first day of their shoot, just to say, hey, we see what you're doing. We don't really appreciate it, but here's a sandwich on us.
Yeah, try to get one of those in Georgia.
Yeah. If you want authenticity, you know where to come back.
Yeah. There's some films that are going to be shot in Tampa. Can you talk about some of those?
So, I can't talk about everything, but there's a couple of ones that have been very public, so I'm comfortable talking about those. So speaking of a Florida-based project, another very famous book was a book by the name of Land Remembered. And it is a generational story of a fictitious Florida landowning family, but it was based very much off of historical families that were kind of the first families of Florida. So even though it is historical fiction, it's very historically accurate. But it takes place between the 1840s all the way up to the 1970s, and it's basically 4 generations of family as they kind of move through time.
Oh, I didn't realize it covers that much time.
So the first generation is the first kind of cattle owners, and they're coming into Florida to drive free range cattle, and that turns into actually owning land and farming and having kind of fenced in non-free range cattle, and that moves into owning real estate and property, and it finally ends in the 70s with kind of real estate barons in Miami. So it kind of just jumps through time. But this is a huge series. It is
a series, not a movie.
It is a series. And it's the book itself is read by every 5th grader in the state's required reading. So it's a beloved series, but it's being brought to life by a local filmmaker. Shouldn't say local. He lives here and grew up in Tampa, but he's done a lot of major projects, known a lot of big companies over the years. But a guy named Todd Weissman, I'm very, very passionate about this project. And he's risen a ton of money for this, and the state's actually backing it for the first time, going back to incentives. This is the first project the state has incentivized since Dolphin Tale, so almost 20 years ago. So it's really important. But this is a massive series. It's going to be a limited series, so each generation it's going to be a 4-episode kind of mini series as it kind of jumps through time. The first season is going to be the first 4 episodes dealing with the original family that's kind of free range driving cattle. It's a series that's going to really activate the middle of the state. It's going to employ a ton of people, in fact, hundreds of people at some point. It's going to put people to work that may have never worked in the film industry. And what's really important to us is that they get the authenticity of Florida, which I think really speaks to the diversity in our locations and our landmarks. But it's also a series that's going to put Tampa back on the map, I think, and just Florida at large back on the map. We like to say this could be our next Yellowstone. So it really has the opportunity to expand and really prove not only to filmmakers still left in Florida that, hey, there's big opportunities out there, but I think prove to the legislature that if you invest in films in a way that is incentivizing Florida crews, telling Florida stories, you can be very successful.
I mean, how would they even do this in another state? I mean, they could make Georgia look like Florida, but, it's not ideal.
They do all the time. There's there's a show called Florida Man.
They don't shoot that in Florida?
No, they don't. They shoot that up in Savannah and Tybee. But they still need some authenticity as far as some B-roll, right?
Yeah.
So even though they're shooting the majority of it out of state, they still send down a B unit to shoot some stuff. But it just kind of sticks in your craw every time that it's a Florida-based story and they're shooting it somewhere other than Florida. But this is not the case. So this is a completely Florida-based told story by Florida filmmakers, crewed by Floridians.
And shot in Florida.
And
it could be going on it's probably going to be going on for a couple of years, right?
But that's the hope. So they are shooting this completely independent of the studio system, completely independent of the streaming system, right? So this is them wanting to tell their story as creatively free as possible with no studio notes, right? And the only way to do that is to finance it yourself. So they went out and raised tens of millions of dollars to create this TV show. So they know they're moving forward with the first season, and then it's up in the air what happens after that. So if it's successful, if it gets picked up, people watch it, then I think you're going to see the entire book completed over the next couple of years. Even though it's only a 4-episode miniseries, each episode's kind of its own feature film, right? So we're going to be employing people. I think production dates actually start around March 23rd, and they're going to continue filming almost constantly from then until late fall of this year, right? So you're talking almost 9, 10 months of production where people are going to be able to work consistently.
They're going to shoot right through the summer?
Right. Well, we'll see how far they get when they realize how hot it's going to be. But, this is really going to be a great opportunity. And that's just one of many, many projects coming through here.
Is that another thing that keeps Florida from getting bigger productions? And we don't have the weather of California.
We do certain times a year.
Certain time,
right?
like now.
Like right now.
Yeah.
So we're recording this in February. This is the time of year. Actually, late fall sometimes can also be as good. But really, if you look at the rest of the country, it's crappy weather for a lot of the year. And outside of California and in Florida, there really isn't a lot of opportunity to shoot during the winter. There just isn't, right? And the way these things are working, you're shooting months and months in advance. So particularly for a commercial, right? So use this example all the time. If you're Louis Vuitton or Mercedes-Benz or Nike and you're trying to shoot your summer collateral, you're going to be shooting it in February and March. Mm-hmm. You need a place that looks like it's summer, that it's bright, it's happy, it's fun. You're not doing that in Chicago. You're not doing that in New York. You're not doing it through most of the Midwest or the Northeast, right? So we are the beneficiaries of having great weather. But then you kind of turn the clock forward and you get into the summer months, and it can be really rough, right? It is incredibly hot, and it's a wet hot. And what does that mean for a film set? Well, if you think you need 3 of every wardrobe, no, you need 10 of every wardrobe because people just will sweat through their costumes 10 times a day. And then you have inclement weather every afternoon. People live in Tampa Bay area.
Every afternoon.
Every afternoon.
True.
You can set your watch by it. Around 3:30, clouds are going to start rolling in. It's going to pour cats and dogs from 4:30 to 5:15, and then it's going to blow out, right? But you have that storm that's going to come in. It's going to interrupt your filming, and it also interrupts the visual palette, right? Something looks different wet as it does dry, right? Particularly concrete, right? It's a totally different look. It brings out a vibrancy and a color. So now productions have to think about, well, do I need to do a wet down before? There's all kinds of different things that go into it. And I will tell you, even though hurricane seasons, and we know this as Floridians, that, we really don't have to worry until we get into August, September, October. We don't have storms earlier than that typically, but people, all they see is that, it's hurricane season. And while other parts of the Gulf might be getting a storm here and there, Florida typically isn't during the early months of the summer.
We got spared last year.
We did, and even all the way through the end of hurricane season. But people are terrified of these. And I don't understand necessarily why, not to say or trivialize the damage that a hurricane can cause, but a tornado you can't prepare for. You can't prepare for an earthquake or a volcano or any other kind of crazy stuff, right? A hurricane, days and days and days in advance that it's coming, right? 10 days out, you can
get the heck out.
You can get the heck out. You can plan, you can shift your schedule. Whereas if you're shooting in the Midwest, like there was a lot of productions last year that were shooting in Oklahoma. And it's like, oh no, there might be a thunderstorm this afternoon. And a thunderstorm turns into, a Category 4 tornado. And it's like, what is going on?
Nobody saw that coming.
No, right. So there is this perpetual fear. And I think it was compounded, not this last year, which we were, again, knock on wood, we were very lucky we didn't get hit at all. But the previous year, we had 3 named storms that came through the Tampa Bay area and really wrecked us. In fact, I lost my roof in one of those. And that is scared people. So like this year, again, even though we were very lucky in not having a hurricane, we saw a precipitous fall in the number of productions, particularly through October and November, which is historically our busiest months for hurricanes if it's going to be a bad year. And people just didn't shoot this year. They waited until after November when hurricane season was over, or they tried to shoot before that. So we had a very slow October and November, which normally it's some of our busiest months. So it does create a fear.
What are some of the low-end productions that come here? Commercials, things like that?
I wouldn't even say our commercials are low-end. I'd say our average commercial is about $200,000 budgets, with a lot of them in the millions of dollars. We just had Men's U.S. Soccer shoot a huge shoot here for the World Cup. We just had Mercedes-Benz, Airstream, some really, really big shoots. But, we do have a lot of lower-end indie type films that come here. So when I say lower end, it's I think as far as industry would be concerned to be 5 million or below, but I'll tell you most of them are usually $1 million or less. We have a lot of those that shoot here, and because it's so expensive, even with incentives in places like Georgia or Oklahoma or Louisiana, even though they're not getting it as big of an incentive in Florida or from a localized incentive, it's cheaper to film here. So they actually get a better value in the long run.
Yeah.
Right. If you're trying to shoot in Atlanta and there's 25 other shoots going on, good luck finding a hotel, or good luck finding crew, or good luck finding equipment that you're not having to pay a premium for. Right. So we get around a lot of that stuff. But we also have a lot of network TV shows that come through here, a lot of Lifetime movies, a lot of Hallmark movies. And those are great, right? On the high end, Hallmark might be spending $800,000 to $1.5 million, somewhere in that range a lot of times. Lifetime, considerably less. But they're great shoots for crews to work, right? Because you can roll from one to one to one to one, and you just kind of roll through the summer.
And what makes them pick Florida over Atlanta?
It's locations, right?
Yeah. Depending what it's about.
Depending what it's about, but they also want diversity of locations. And the way a lot of these shoots, because if you're under $2 million, you're really only be working 16 to maybe 22 days max, right? That's about all you can squeeze out of that much money, just having a fleshed out crew and some expectations as far as equipment and gear and locations. So if you are, a Lifetime movie and you've got 15 locations to get through, and you only have 16 days to do it in, or less. I mean, we've had some that come in and shoot in 14 days, right? It's really hard to get that many types of locations in Atlanta, or like a Peachtree City outside of Atlanta.
Yeah.
It all very samey, and depending on the time of the year, you're going to have deciduous trees. It's it's a bunch of dead things around it. It's very gray. It's very brown. We have a vibrancy here. And if you just look in the Bay Area alone, it's just kind of true in other parts of Florida as well. But if you dropped a pin downtown Tampa and drew a 60-mile radius around it, right, you have world-class beaches over in Clearwater. You have two very distinct urban downtown areas between St. Petersburg and Tampa. You have the best international airport in the country at Tampa International. You've got some of the most rural areas in the state of Florida over in Plant City, Thonotasa, Ruskin area. So within a 60-mile radius, right, or less, really, you're really talking about 30 miles. And within an hour, you can be in dozens of different topographies, different looks, where a production that has to shoot very quickly, has to have a lot of company moves, has to have a lot of different looks. We can facilitate that here, where an Atlanta can't, I'll be honest.
So let's shift gears a little bit. You're the board president of Tampa Bay Community Network.
I am. So I have been involved with TBCN. We were trying to go offline and figure out when I started, but I think I came on as the chair in 2017.
Okay.
And, Alexis Milner, who was the previous chair and was the editor of the Tampa Bay Business Journal, at the time, I remember him calling me up and like, hey, great organization, we'd like you to be involved, but I really don't have the time to be a chair anymore. I still want to be very active in the board, and Alexis absolutely is still very much involved with the board. But he was hoping that someone else could come in, and not with more enthusiasm. Everyone on the board is very enthusiastic about supporting TBCN, but just had the time and the drive to just sort of step into the chair role, and I was happy to do it. And I've somehow stayed the chair ever since.
Okay, so we have Alexis to thank for you.
Yeah, you have Alexis to thank for me.
Well, that's awesome. What everything considered about TBCN and content creators online, and how does TBCN remain relevant?
That's a great question, because I know some people think like, oh, public access, why do I need that? Because there's YouTube, right? There's streaming platforms, there's Twitch and other things. And what people are failing to see is that there is a lot of technology that goes into running a YouTube channel or a Twitch channel that is very cost prohibitive, right? You can't just go out and do it. I suppose you could use your cell phone, but people look at someone online that they might follow and think, oh, that's easy, I could do that. And what they don't realize is that person has put in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours to craft a channel on YouTube using very high-end equipment. They're probably not editing the content themselves. You get to a certain level and you're probably hiring a production company to do a lot of the stuff for you. A normal person doesn't have access to that. And more importantly, a person can be very intimidated by technology. And even though they might have a great story to tell, or they want to connect with their community by sharing something, they don't have the means to do it, right? And maybe it's not the technical proficiency, maybe it's just the time, right? They don't have the time to really sink in to do it. So a place like TBC and how it stays relevant is that it's not just the platform to view things, right? It's not just the channel. It's everything.
So much more than that.
It's everything behind it, right? It's the people that are here, and it's the ability to train the community and offer a safe space for someone to come in and say, hey, I want to tell a story. I don't know where to start. What do I do? how do I get into this? How do I do a podcast? How do I, use my phone to connect with an audience on YouTube? And there are trainers here at TBCN that can take you through that process and teach you something and really get value out of that. And then once you go through that training program, now you have an opportunity to come back to TBCN and say, hey, I have a great idea for a show. And you guys have all the equipment here to do that. Right. And they'll help you raise money to sponsor the show. And there's a way that someone can create something out of whole cloth with very little experience, right? Because all the stuff to do that is here. It's all turnkey, which you don't have in other situations. And that's where TBCN stays relevant. Again, it's not the channel, it's the people behind it, right? It's the learning opportunities that really makes this place so singularly different than I think any other public access channel ever before it, right? This really is kind of its own thing.
Yeah, we've evolved. I mean,
yeah, back, you had to.
20 years ago we had 50 shows on the air. People would come in, do live shows all day long. That's gone now. But we're focusing more on training, and it's not just for people starting YouTube channels and online content. People come out of here and get jobs in the industry. They start their own company, they become freelancers, or they find full-time jobs based on their training here.
Yeah, they do. And I'm not going to discount going to college or anything like that, because I was an educator at some point myself, and I obviously spent a lot of time getting a master's degree along the way. But a lot of people who come to TBCN, they may be a little older, little later stage in their life, and they're just looking to hey, I really want to connect with friends and family. I want to be able to tell my story. I don't have the time to go to college again, or I don't have the money to go to college again. And this is an opportunity for them to learn a new trade skill at their own level, at their own pace, that they don't have to be intimidated by it, right? And that gives them the ability to then go back and tell their own story, whether it's producing a show actually for TBCN, or it's just being comfortable going back and doing videos to connect with their friends and family on Facebook, right? It's giving them a new tool set and a new way to share things.
What do you think TBCN needs to do to keep relevant?
So, I've already hit this with the education. But I think you need to keep going back to that. That's really where the opportunity to grow and expand is. And by tapping into education, that also lends itself to writing grants, right? And finding more and more grant opportunities to expand that footprint. And then I think you kind of have to go back to the old model where you had public access TV, and for those that are old enough, remember Wayne's World, right?
Yeah.
But these were crazy shows, and if you look at TBCN's history, there was always crazy shows. There was a guy who would get drunk and give sex advice at one point. There was the famous Lobster Boy who would sit there with his phone and rant and rave, just crazy things, right? And that's what made it unique. And I think in addition to expanding the educational opportunities, which I really think should be the heart for as long as this space exists, it really should be the heart. But also getting back to just giving people the creative space to do whatever wild, crazy idea they have. Public access is shielded by freedom of speech, right? Anyone can come in here. This is a public access station. It is meant for the people to express themselves in whatever crazy way they want to. And I think bringing back some of the fun of that is something that's been missing over the last maybe decade. And I'm not really sure why that shifted and why you got away from that original content voice. Well, YouTube, but there is still a space for that.
Yeah.
And again, not everyone can just go in and run a YouTube channel, but getting back to some of those silly things, you have the Weather Kids, which people love on the YouTube channel. That's fun, right? It's just something unique. It's different. It's new content. And it keeps the channel fresh and relevant. So I think it's a two combo thing where you got to keep investing in education and then getting back to just telling authentic, strange, community-based stories that only the wild people in the community that you live, work, and play with, right? These are your neighbors. Come out and tell.
Staff also produces a handful of shows, and we get grant money from the county. We get money from the city. So I guess the whole thing is getting grants is the biggest thing to keep us going.
It is, and it's really, really difficult. So as someone who's on a bunch of different boards, particularly Film Florida, which I'm the vice president of, and we're very grant dependent as well. it's not just finding the money, it's figuring out how to use the money, because that's something it's consistently difficult, because you might get a grant for $500,000, right? But to jump through all the hoops to be able to actually spend or receive that money can be monumentally difficult, and they don't make it easy, and rightfully so. I mean, in a lot of cases, this is money that could go to a bunch of different places, so they want to be discerning in who gets the access to the funds. But man, it is a heavy lift to use that money and use it effectively.
So where do you see the film scene in Tampa heading? Is it going to grow? Are we going to get an incentive? What's going to happen?
I'm hopeful sometime in the next 10 years, we might have a shot at a statewide incentive. And I think a project like Land Remembered could be a catalyst for that. Because I think what is missing is people seeing value in investing in film beyond the economics of it, right? Because there's a lot of studies that can show that, they spend this much money, they hire this many people, it builds crews and tourism, but people have to be proud about the projects coming out of a state, right? And I think a Land Remembered, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, you're going to be able to look at this and say, wow, this is telling a Florida story. It's family friendly, it's historic, it's authentic. This is what Florida is. It's not the silly, person eating bath salts and then murdering someone while wrestling an alligator that the media likes to put out there, that this is what Florida is. Now, Florida is a lot of other things, right? And this is helping to tell that story. So I think that's going to be one. As far as the Tampa Bay community goes, we're one of the largest growing production hubs in the state. So whereas a lot of other places might be stagnant or even in decline, we're not. We're on the rise. So we have over 4,000 filmmakers here in the Tampa Bay area, and that continues to grow every year. We have one of the highest wages in the state for people working in film and digital media.
Oh, is that true?
Median wage is $105,000 a year for people working in film and digital media in Hillsborough County, which is like 64% higher than the next industry, right? So it's really a good opportunity to work in a meaningful way, especially as Florida continues to become more expensive to live, right? This is an industry that's paying a livable wage still in the state. And then you look at the numbers of productions. So when I first started in 2013, we were lucky to get 150 productions a year coming through Tampa Bay. And now we're doing 400 plus a year. So we've continued to grow and grow and grow and grow. I don't see that slowing anytime soon. I think the types of content might shift and change, and a lot of people are running towards vertical filming, which is those micro dramas. But you have to understand that, there is a next generation. There's someone younger than us, John, who watches this stuff.
So I'm wrong to detest vertical.
Well, I don't know how to watch them, right? It drives me nuts. I'm not a doom scroller. I don't do these things. But you have to cater to something. Because we're not going to be in theaters the rest of our lives. At some point, the Pony Express ran its course, right? We needed to move on to something different. And that's
how long before we're seeing vertical films in the theater?
Well, I don't think we ever will. But I think the point is that people are going to say, well, Mom and Dad can go to the movie theaters. Like, we're going to sit home and watch it on our phones, which some of the, an old dinosaur like myself, that's a shame, right? Because there is something to be, about the communal experience of going to the theaters. But we got to shift. So I think you're actually going to see more productions than ever before. It's just going to be different types of productions.
Lower end,
But but lower end, you're thinking lower end in the wrong way. And I had this discussion with someone the other day who I was trying to convince to come to Tampa Bay. You might be spending $3,000-$4,000 on a vertical, but you're shooting 1,000 of those. So you look at it collectively not as a bunch of individual things, but as like a TV show, right? This is the culmination of dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of different videos. And all of a sudden you look at the economic impact and it's like, oh, you spent $1.5 million, for this K-drama that's shot on a cell phone with 5 people, but you shot 1,000 of these, right, over the course of 3 months. You spent over $1 million, right? So the economics of it is still there. It's just a different way of viewing things. And you look at it, and to us, it's like, wow, the production value is terrible. But to the people viewing it, they love it. They don't notice it.
They don't notice it.
They don't. So it's just a different way of communicating.
What about AI? How is AI going to, and for like virtual sets, for instance, that's AI.
Yeah. So I think there's going to be a huge pushback for feature films and TV shows for jumping into AI. I think you've seen that backlash already during the Christmas season. A lot of people came in and said, I'm not buying Coca-Cola or Pepsi or anything. The ad you put out there are schlock. They're terrible. it's insulting to your client base. And I think that's going to be true for feature films and TV shows in particular, right? Because I think there's still something to be said about celebrity that cannot be replaced with an AI actor. Now, with that said, I think commercials are going to see the largest disruption because that is just basic bottom line. Mm-hmm. And if I'm a Fortune 500 company and I need to pump out a ton of collateral over the course of the year, and I can cut out the middleman by hiring a bunch of people to sit in a room and push some buttons on a computer to make it happen for me. And that's very reductive. There's a lot that goes into actually building out AI that's convincing and usable. But it's going to be a huge disruptor in the commercial space. And I think that's the sector of the industry that is going to see the largest shakeup as a result of AI. And then I think the people, again, let's just say under 25 right now, the people who are actually looking at vertical content constantly, I don't think they care who makes it anymore.
I guess not.
I just think that it's just this dopamine response, right? Yeah. Again, that's kind of reductive, but I think in that space as well, you're going to see a lot of TV shows, and what we say TV shows, it might be 30-second micro dramas that, you're going to watch 40 episodes of before you get to the first hour of content or whatever it ends up being. But I think that's going to be a space where AI is going to just take over. And it might be, particularly with AI, we've seen this, and this has been true for other technologies. It'll start off in Asia and it sort of hits saturation, and then it sort of moves over to us eventually. So I think we're probably 5-10 years behind the rest of the world as far as the consumption and the using of AI. But I think you're going to see very quickly where a lot of these verticals in China, in Korea in particular, are going to be almost entirely produced by AI.
And what about LED walls, like places like View Studios?
So, look, selfishly, I like people coming to Tampa to shoot Tampa for Tampa, right? Yeah. But, LED volumes are going to be used more and more in the future, particularly for these vertical streaming shows, right? You don't have the time or the budget to shoot 1,000 of these vertical episodes by running around. So what you're seeing is a lot of these dramas, in particular, that are being made, or these little micro comedies, they're either being shot in one location, like a coffee shop, or they're using virtual walls to speed through 40 different locations in a day because that's the pace that they're running at. So the content for the AI, or sorry, for the virtual walls, you're still going to rely upon craftsmen to create a lot of the assets, but I think AI is going to start stepping in more and more, particularly for landscapes and cityscapes. I don't think AI is quite up to snuff yet to create virtual characters in a convincing way. It kind of still hits that uncanny valley, though. We've had some examples in the media just in the last 5 days of recording this that have been groundbreaking and incredibly convincing. But I think it does locations really well.
It does, yeah. And you could save a lot on travel.
100%, yeah. And even if it's I shot a plate, but now I need to fill out the background, it's really good at that kind of stuff.
You're still going to need people to program, so maybe people in the industry learn new things.
Yeah, and that's
keep up with technology.
That's always been true. If you look at the film credits of like a John Ford Western compared to the credits of today, there are hundreds of jobs that didn't exist back then that there are now, particularly in post effects. But there's also jobs that were back then that don't exist now either, right? There used to be, you used to see arc light projectionist or arc light tender. And that's people that were literally sitting there pushing a magnesium rod through the back of a light over the course of several hours to burn it in order to create a lighting effect, right? And that job doesn't even exist anymore. Why? Because they found out it caused cancer, and most of the people who worked that job ended up dying of cancer horribly. But there's always an evolution in technology, and as that happens, sometimes it means getting rid of certain jobs, but also means the creation of new jobs. Now, I think the smart person is going to be nimble enough to see the writing on the wall, and maybe let's learn a little bit more about AI. Let's see how I can maybe get into this before I just wake up one morning and it's like, oh, I don't have a job anymore. Right. And that's a shame, and it's going to happen to some people that way. But it's going to be a self-inflicted wound because I think it's out there. People know it's coming. So now is the time when you should be looking at how do I integrate this into what I do and how do I future-proof myself.
I try to embrace AI as much as I can. For instance, I use ChatGPT to get a lot of the questions I'm asking you, and they do a great job.
They do. It's really good at certain things, and most of the various AIs, whether it's ChatGPT or Grok or whatever, it is learning based on a pattern of your own behaviors. So what you see is AI isn't getting smarter necessarily, even though it isn't in the technological sense, but it's just learning how to be more like you, right? Because it's basing its prompts off of what you're putting in.
Yeah, it knows what I do for a living.
Yeah. And what you find is that all of a sudden, particularly if you're using it for grammatical help or writing an email or whatever, if you're using it consistently in a certain way, it starts sounding like you, right? Which is either terrifying or,
right.
It's something to embrace. But all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is really good, and it's because it's using your own knowledge.
It knows my style.
It knows your style, and all of a sudden it feels very natural. And again, that can be very scary, and I think it is scary in a certain sense. But it's not something to run away from, because the horse is already out of the barn, right? You're not putting this back in. So you either get on board with it and try to figure out, how do I use it to its best ability in support of what I do, not to replicate you or to take your place, but to enhance what you do. And that can be true for any industry, or no matter what your skill sets are. You need to start looking at that and saying, hey, how do I jump into this pool?
So people out there, embrace AI. Do not run away from it.
You have to.
Yeah. Anything you want to add?
There's a reason why I've been the chair of TBCN for all these years. And again, if I'm right, it's been since 2017. And I keep coming back every year, every month for our board meetings. It's because TBCN is a place that has continued to grow and evolve. And the TBCN that I was first introduced to, almost 10 years ago, is not the same TBCN that is here today. Right. Some of the people are still the same, but a lot of them have changed. The space has certainly changed over the years. I'm sure it'll again in the future. But you guys have been so good about reinventing yourself and still finding a way to connect with the community in a way that is not only meaningful, but a way that justifies the existence of this space. And that's very exciting. And for people who are listening, perhaps the first time, you're tuned in because I was on the guest, or you've never experienced TBCN, it's worth coming down and looking at the space. Don't dismiss it because it's public access TV. That's not what not what this place is. It is a place where people can learn new skills. It's where they can network, find out more about their community, and connect with their community in a way where they're telling their own authentic stories. Right? I think that's the most important thing. Is that a lot of people, particularly from certain sectors of the socioeconomic ladder, right? They come from underprivileged areas, and they don't have those opportunities to really share their own experiences. I think that's what's really lacking in a lot of ways with traditional TV, even today with streaming, as niche as it has become. You can find any interest you want, but it still lacks an authentic voice in a lot of ways. And that's not the case here. I mean, everything that you guys do is community driven, and it really is a joy. So if you've never experienced TBCN, if this is the first time you're hearing about it, or you kind of know about it, you've never come in to chat with people, do yourself a favor, come in, sit down with staff, talk about them, learn a little bit more about what they do, and help this place grow by spreading the message of what TBCN is. So if you have connected with TBCN and it's someplace you love, take the time to like their videos, share their videos, let people know that this is a space that needs to be supported. Subscribe, yes.
Yeah. That's exactly what we were looking for, is someone like you to come in and help us grow, and you've certainly done that.
Well, I can't take credit for that. It's really entirely the staff here that just dedicates and puts a ton of work and time into it.
It's true. It is a lot of work, but it's worth it. And thanks for being there for us.
I surely appreciate it.
Yeah. Tampa Bay Community Network offers media training, editing services, and resources to bring your ideas to life. Visit tbcn.org to learn more, and check out our content on YouTube at Tampa Bay Community Network. See you next time.